Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're really going to dig into the mind of Pierre Poilievre, the leader of Canada's opposition. We're going to look at the personal story that he says fuels his entire political mission, and the big ideas he thinks can reshape the whole country. So let's just jump right in with a super personal story that Poilievre says is the key to understanding everything about him. When he was 21, he decided he wanted to find his biological mother. So he goes to his adoptive mom, Marlene, to get her blessing. And her response, which you see right here, was this act of grace that he says he'll just never forget. Now, he argues this moment is about way more than family. For him, it's about freedom and choice. And those are the core ideas of his entire political philosophy. And that story, about family and choice, it leads us directly into his formative years. Poilievre argues that his working-class upbringing isn't just some backstory he tells on the campaign trail. He says it's the very foundation of his entire political project, which is to restore what he calls the promise of Canada. Poilievre's political identity, it was really forged in the fire of his youth. He was adopted by two school teachers, grew up in a world of calloused hands and honest work. A whole community of electricians, oil workers, and cops. But he also saw firsthand just how fragile that world was. He actually watched his family lose everything, their home, their savings, when interest rates just shot through the roof. It was a searing memory of economic pain that he says he carries with him to this very day. And this right here, this is the core of his whole message. He takes his personal history of struggle and he turns it into a national mission. He argues that the Canadian dream, that simple promise that if you work hard, you'll get ahead, has been shattered for the working class. His goal, as he puts it, is to pick up the pieces. Okay, so you've got this personal mission, right? But how does that turn into a political diagnosis? Poilievre believes that all the economic anxiety we're seeing across the Western world isn't some accident. He claims it has a very specific and maybe a surprising cause. He has this term for it, socialism for the rich. His whole argument is that the problem isn't free markets themselves, but a rigged system. A system where government intervention, through subsidies and regulations, funnels wealth upwards to corporations and the elite. He'd point to something like corporate bailouts as a perfect example, where the working class ends up footing the bill for the mistakes of the powerful. This brings us to the housing crisis, which Poilievre sees as the ultimate symptom of this whole broken system. And he presents this really stark contradiction. Canada has these vast amounts of land, right? Yet it somehow has the fewest homes per person in the entire G7. I mean, how is that even possible? For him, the answer is simple. Government is getting in the way. So his solution starts with a number, a big one. To make housing affordable again, he says Canada needs to build 450,000 new homes every single year. Right now, the country is building just over half that. The gap is just immense, and he argues it's a crisis that needs immediate, drastic action. So what's driving up the cost? Well, Poilievre claims it's not the usual suspects. Not land, not labor, not materials. Nope. He points the finger directly at government. He argues that this huge web of bureaucracy, taxes, and endless permit delays are just strangling the supply, and that in the end, more of your money goes to these gatekeepers in City Hall than to the actual people swinging the hammers. Okay, so if government is the problem, what's the solution? For Poilievre, the answer lies in a really radical shift in economic philosophy, a move away from big government and towards what he calls big citizens. And what's really fascinating about this is that to understand his vision for the future, you have to go back, way back, to the 18th century. As a teenager, there was this one single book that just captured his imagination and pretty much set the course for his entire political ideology. That book was Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations. Poilievre is a firm believer in Smith's famous concept of the invisible hand, the idea that millions of individual voluntary transactions, all guided by price, can organize an economy far more effectively than any government committee ever could. So this philosophy is basically the engine for his whole platform. His prescription is pretty straightforward. Get the gatekeepers out of the way. And that means cutting taxes, slashing red tape, and unleashing Canada's natural resources. The goal is to let the free market, not the government, tackle the rising cost of living. Now, this plan to unlock Canada's domestic potential has a second equally important dimension, how he wants to reposition Canada on the world stage, especially when it comes to the United States. He argues that America is making a huge mistake right now by pushing its allies away. His message to the U.S. is pretty clear.
You are stronger with friends like Canada, not by trying to climb the mountain all by yourself.
And he uses data just like this to really hammer the point home. I mean, take a look at the countries with the world's largest oil reserves. He asks a really simple question. Who would you rather buy your energy from? For him, the answer is a complete no-brainer. So his strategy is crystal clear, and he's not apologizing for it. Canada is a resource superpower, and it's time to start acting like one. He believes Canada should leverage its massive energy wealth to get what it wants from the United States, starting with completely tariff-free trade.
And look, these aren't some new ideas he just cooked up. To really understand how deeply he holds these beliefs, you just have to look back to an essay he wrote when he was only 20 years old. Decades before he was a party leader, his mission was already clear: relinquish government control and put power back in the hands of the people.
So it all comes down to this. Pierre Poilievre is staking his entire political future on a very old idea, that the path to prosperity is paved with less government, not more. He's betting that the 18th century wisdom of Adam Smith is the cure for our 21st century problems. The question for Canada, and maybe for the whole Western world, is whether that's a bet worth taking.